Hi, I'm Elizabeth with Logic Walk. In this lesson, we're going to talk about folders. If you've ever used a computer, you already have some experience with them. Modern operating systems organize files by placing them inside folders, also known as directories. Folders help keep our data organized and easy to find, just like how we use labeled folders in a file cabinet to group related documents together. Without them, finding a single file on a hard drive with millions of files would be nearly impossible. We can create folders in the shell using the make directory command, or mkdir for short. Here, I'm creating a new folder called Documents. Once the folder is created, we want to add a file inside it. To do that, we first need to move into the folder using the change directory, or cd command. Now that we're inside the Documents directory, we can start creating files just as we did before using the write command. Let's create two files. The first will be a text file called birthday.txt, which contains the date September 18th, 1995. Notice that there are no spaces in the date. The characters are continuous and the numbers are separated by dashes. Next, let's create another file called phone number.txt. This name uses an underscore to connect the words phone and number. Inside this file, we'll add the phone number shown on the screen, with each group of digits separated by dashes. To see which files exist in our current folder, we can use the ls command. When we run this command, we see the two text files we created earlier, the birthday and phone number.txt files. Now let's organize things further by adding another folder called Forms inside the Documents folder. Even though our setup is still simple, it's easy to imagine how quickly things can become complex. Folders can contain other folders, sometimes dozens or even hundreds, and it's easy to lose track of where we are in the shell. To check which folder we're currently in, we can use the print working directory command, or pwd for short. This is the same command we used back in chapter 1 to show our current location. Running this command prints the Documents folder on the screen, confirming exactly where we are in the file system. Right before the folder name, you'll notice a /. Recall from chapter 1 that this symbol represents the root folder. The root folder is special. It's the parent folder of all other files and folders. Everything lives within the root folder, including the Documents folder we created in our shell and any additional folders we'll create beyond that. Let's take a look at our file system so far. At the very top, we have the root folder. It branches out to the Documents folder, which contains two files and an additional folder called Forms that we created. You might be wondering how the root folder appeared if we never actually created one ourselves. That happens automatically in most operating systems. To keep files organized, the Logic Walk OS automatically creates a root folder as the default working directory so that all descendant files and folders exist within it. Now, what if we want to move up one level in the file system, from Documents back to its parent folder, the root? We can do this using the change directory command, followed by two dots. Typing this command moves us from the Documents folder to its parent, which in this case is the root folder. To confirm that we have successfully moved, we can use the pwd command. Running this command shows that we are now located in the root folder. In this shell, let's move into the Forms folder and create a text file called tax form that contains the text 2024 USA tax form. Now our file system has grown. As we continue creating files and folders, notice how the system forms a unique path to each item. For example, if we started at the root folder and want to reach the tax form we just created, we would follow this sequence. Start at the root folder, then go to the Documents, then to Forms, and finally to the tax form text file. What we just described is called a file path. Each part of the path is separated by /. We can also use file paths to create new files. Let's create a new text file called location inside the Documents folder. Even though we're currently inside the Forms folder, we can still create a file elsewhere by using the write command followed by the full file path. We begin with the root folder, then the Documents folder, then the name of the new file, and finally the text we want to include, which is Berlin. After we run this command, we see a new file appear in the Documents folder, even though we weren't inside the Documents folder in the shell. Let's walk through a few examples using the file paths and break down what is happening behind the scenes. On the screen, we have these commands. The cat command prints the contents of a file to the screen. In this case, we use the full path to print the text stored inside the location text file. Next, we use the cd command followed by a / to move back to the root folder. Then we use the ls command to list the contents of the root folder. which currently contains only one item, the Documents folder. Now let's try one more example. Consider the command shown on the screen. On the first line, we moved into the Documents folder. Then we use the cat command with the following file path. Notice that this file path does not begin with a /. This type of file path is known as a relative path because it does not start at the root. When the operating system encounters a relative path, it begins its search in the current working directory instead of starting from the root folder. In this example, the LWOS first looks for the Forms folder inside the Documents folder because that is where we are currently working. Then the OS moves into the Forms folder and locates the tax form. In our last lesson, we saw that creating a file with the same name as an existing one would overwrite its contents. However, when using a file system, file names no longer need to be globally unique. For example, consider these two paths. Both text files share the same name, but they are stored in different locations. One is inside the Documents folder and the other is inside the Forms folder, which lives within Documents. The file system keeps track of each file's unique path, allowing files with the same name to exist in separate folders. Let's take a closer look at how this helps us stay organized. Suppose we're looking for a photo of Mickey that we took on vacation in February of 2022. We don't remember exactly where it's stored, so we start in the root. On the screen, you can see the root folder at the top, followed by the Photos folder. Inside Photos are subfolders for different years. If we open the 2022 folder, we see folders for each month. Selecting February shows a few image files, including the picture of Mickey we took on vacation. Folder structures like this make it much easier to store, locate, and manage files, even as the number of files grows. This wraps up our lesson on file systems. In the next lesson, we'll take a look behind the scenes to see how the Logic Walk operating system actually represents a file system internally.